This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my guest today is Walker Deibel. Walker, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Kevin, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
So, unpack a little bit for us. Who is Walker Deibel?
Sure.
I know you got 15 minutes.
My worst nightmare is being somewhere and someone says, "So what do you do?" Right? Right.
Based on
Ultimately,
your history, that's for sure.
right. So ultimately, I consider myself an acquisition entrepreneur. Right. I own three businesses. One's in manufacturing,
Mhm.
one's in B2B fulfillment, and one's online. It's in e-commerce. Right. I also do some M&A advisory work. I help online entrepreneurs exit their businesses now.
Okay,
And then, of course, some other stuff,
sure.
right? Yeah.
So, and you that's just touching on the business side of things. I mean, there's a whole different world of Walker Deibel that you didn't even touch on. So take a little quick John off the path and talk a little bit about the anything that might be found on IMDb.
Film production, sure. Yeah. So I'm an executive producer, mostly of feature films, both of documentaries and independent features.
Uh-huh.
Um, Almost every film that I've had the pleasure to work on in kind of my 2.0 version of reality, I've had the pleasure to have someone on the team with an Academy Award, right?
Wow.
So yeah, I mean everything from working with Seth Gordon as a producer to Diane Wiest
Hmm.
on Five Nights in Maine, for
Yeah.
example. Yeah.
I
So
saw the trailer of that one. I'm really looking
yeah,
forward to seeing that.
yeah, it was a lot of fun to make. It's and there's an interview out there of me, and they were talking they were asking me about film and whatever, and I mean I've met plenty of famous people or whatever, and all of a sudden I met Diane Wiest, and I just kind of started like I couldn't talk, I was just like kind of starstruck, and I was like, what just happened? Like how why was it Diane? And another producer said to me, I found out I had the same thing with other people, and I find out it's the people that are famous when you never think that you're going to be in the film industry. So Diane Wiest, of course, was she was in The Lost Boys, she was in
Sure.
Footloose, she was in Parenthood, she was in like these Woody Allen movies right during my teens when I was sort of like diving head first into film. So
The
yeah.
formative years.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Yeah, but I've had films play at Sundance, South by Southwest, Toronto
Hmm.
in competition, and every film so far, Spare One has been no, even that one we sold has been sold for distribution. So
You haven't been to Cannes yet, the film
not
festival in
not
France.
yet, not yet, not yet.
That's
It's on
next.
the list. I've got one that we're working on right now that I'm hoping will get there.
It's
But
on the bucket list.
one day at a time. That's
That's
right.
right.
That's right. I will tell you, I mean, being in competition, having a film in competition for Best Picture at Sundance is just you feel like you've made it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
and well, filmmaking is a team. This is not the Louis Armstrong kind of like American solo, entrepreneur kind of story.
Right.
Film is a team sport, and being a producer is a lot of fun because there's this sort of attitude in film that if a film really doesn't work for whatever reason,
Mhm.
it's kind of the director's fault. And if a film does really great, it's because the producer really nailed it.
What a great model. I mean, you accept praise and you deflect blame. I mean, I mean,
Exactly, exactly, exactly. But
the
it's
ultimate
interesting
boss.
because my role in film, we could talk about this. There's a whole story there, but we could talk for an hour about it. But the point is it actually is directly parallel to my startup experience and my
Mm,
business
I bet.
experience and how I've sort of ended up, kind of as far as I know, I kind of coined the term acquisition entrepreneurship.
Hmm.
It was called entrepreneurship through acquisition um, in some, MBA programs, some top-ranked MBA programs, and I'd already kind of started working on the book and the concept years before that kind of formed.
Right.
And as you can tell, that's a very academic kind of term,
Hmm.
right? So I mean, as some people, you've heard of online entrepreneurs, you've heard of real estate entrepreneurs,
Sure.
you've heard of all of these kinds of terms, and so I kind of being someone who's both started companies and bought companies, I started differentiating in my mind. Like there's sort of like startup entrepreneurs and there's kind of acquisition entrepreneurs.
Right.
So yeah, so the point is to get something in film. Let me pull it around here. In film, I've got my own ideas, okay? But trying to fund those, pull those together, get the A team involved and get it off the ground is just as impossible as any other project happening,
Yeah.
right? So when a project starts to come together and you start to see that the right people are attached, and it's like, okay, well, look, there's a market for this film, regardless of whether it's good or not.
Right.
So what we can do is kind of start pulling it together, raise funds around it, and get the thing put together, made, and sold, just like a startup or a business. The product is a film.
It's interesting that you would tie those two words together, because it's almost like when we think of the word startup, we think of that in terms, or we think of the word entrepreneur, we think in the terms of startup versus acquisition. It's almost like the oxymoron. An acquisition entrepreneur is almost an oxymoron in our mindset.
Yeah, so, I get a lot of pushback for sure.
But otherwise, you just become like this the hostile takeover entrepreneur.
Yes,
mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah, but it's kind of like this. I mean, think of like the best entrepreneurs we know. Like every iconoclastic entrepreneur isn't someone who just starts the business. They're also the CEO of this big publicly traded firm, right? Okay, a lot happens in between. Okay,
yeah.
And the thing is that as I kind of started to go through my experience, and it was like, how is this working where we've got these great teams, these great products, these raving fans, the financing, the accelerator programs, all the rest of it. And then it completely falls apart.
Yep.
And this happened for me not once, but twice. Right. And I found luck along the way, just like buying these kind of old economy style businesses and, kind of just bringing, a fresh coat of paint, or, trying to add value the best way that I can, catch on to the current trends. And I just kept finding success that way. And when I went back and looked at the data, I was like, look, we all know startups fail, right? I mean, we just know that. But what really happens? And one of the things that really surprised me, Kevin, let me ask you before I say.
Sure.
How many startups make it?
Over how long a period of time? Over by 5 years from the time they start, or first year? I would say 75-80% of startups fail within the first 3 years.
Right. Okay. So I mean, the vast majority of them, right, don't make it. Okay. Sure. But here's what really caught me was Vern Harnish wrote a book called Scaling Up, and he went out and basically surveyed all of the different sizes of companies. And what he figured out is that 96% of existing companies in the United States never exceed $1 million in revenue.
Wow.
And I'm not going to say that starting a business and, growing it to $500,000 isn't an incredible feat. It is. The point is that very few of us would start a business thinking that we're going to like, hey, I'm just trying to hit $600,000 total in revenue, right?
Sure.
I mean, imagine a 10% net income on that. You're making $60,000. It's a lot easier, to go do something else.
I just quit my $100,000 job to go work for myself for cheaper.
Exactly. And the thing is we go out with these like disruptive ideas and all the rest of it, and we can talk about some of this if you want. But it's like, which ones get picked up? What are the best vehicles that we have to sort of engineer success into these startups? And the truth is, a lot of them just frankly don't work. I mean, they improve. They improve off of this 4%, but not significantly. So I mean, sorry, the default rate anyway, the 10% or 20% as you're guessing. So the point is that I started learning that startups fail. We all know it. We all think we're the exception. But when I went and started looking at the empirical evidence, I started to see pretty clearly that starting a business from scratch is kind of punishment for people that don't understand statistics. Like there's a scene.
I'm
There's
going
a
to
scene
quote
in
you
the
on that.
right, right. There's this scene in The Empire Strikes Back where the sorry, I just went Star Wars here, but
That's
they're
all
going
right.
into the asteroid field or whatever, and Princess Leia says, "You're driving into an asteroid field," and Han's like, "Don't tell me the odds." And that moment just reminds me of myself so many times in life, right? It's like, I got this. No, no,
I
it's
love that
this.
picture, that analogy. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, the stories we hear are just they're very anecdotal. So the point is the startup phase is really the company killer. Okay, we're trying to raise money so that we can create or build some kind of infrastructure. Okay,
right.
that then can support itself through profitable revenue. That's all we're trying to do. And so what I've done 7 times now is basically find the infrastructure that I'm looking for, acquire it way more affordably than it sounds,
Hmm.
and jump into an existing business in order to grow from there.
So let me ask you, is there a sense that you've almost reduced the front end failure percentage by acquiring something that is almost a proven concept at some level? I
Yep.
mean, how many startups, the guy thinks this is a great idea. I'm going to sell
Yeah.
1 million of these. Now he's got a garage full of 1 million widgets, and nobody wants to buy them because nobody else thought it was a great idea other than he
We've
and his
all,
grandma.
yeah, product
Um,
market fit, right?
exactly. So, I mean, you almost reduce the risk of the failure on the front end, by allowing it to kind of prove itself, even though it never scales. And the other thing that came to mind as you were talking was almost like the whole concept behind the E-myth, that
Hmm.
there are people that are designed to do specific things in that chain, and the creator may not be the one that can implement, or the one that can scale, or the one that can manage, or the one, all these different functions. And startups have to, you almost have to be multifaceted, as a
Right.
solo startup. So you want to unpack that just a little bit?
Yeah, I guess what I'd say is like this. I mean, we all know, Elon Musk was, one of the co-founders of PayPal, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't. He bought it from Peter Thiel. Do you know
Okay.
this?
I did not. Yeah.
So Elon Musk actually started a company called X.com that was doing the same thing as Peter Thiel's company, PayPal. Okay. X.com had money, but couldn't really get product market fit. PayPal got product market fit, and as a result, grew really fast and ran out of cash.
Mm.
So Musk bought PayPal, called it X.com, okay, and then over time, whatever happened, but really the board ended up deciding that Musk shouldn't be the CEO, but Peter Thiel should be. And the first thing Peter Thiel did was change the name of the company to
Back to
PayPal.
PayPal. That's right.
Yes. And it's also, I mean, the other thing that we all know, like for sure about Elon Musk is that he started Tesla,
Mm-hmm.
right? He didn't.
Yeah. I knew this was coming. It was a trap.
He didn't. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the thing is, on the one hand, you've got something like, I'm buying PayPal because it's got product market fit. And then let's rewind, because today PayPal is like huge, and buying PayPal sounds insane. But the thing is whether you are simply looking for a lifestyle business, you can go out and buy an existing, online business that you can run as a digital nomad. And you can get funds for that very, very easily. And the cash flow of the business will pay for the capital that you get to buy the company, if that makes sense.
Right.
And the thing is you can buy these companies that are, to your point, have that product market fit, and you can grow them from there. Okay. In terms of what you were talking about with the E-myth, as you've highlighted, is kind of this concept of, boy, I really like, making pies. And all my friends tell me I should build a pie business. Isn't that the example?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And so she starts a pie business, and then the whole point is making a good pie has nothing to do with the pie business. There's a production line, there's
Right.
sales, there's marketing. I got to pay rent. I have employees. There's payroll. There, and all these other things. And the reason she got into the business was totally different than what ended up happening. right? And learning how to manage that business. So, in terms of both of those things, I'd say that, Elon Musk buying Tesla is a perfect example of him understanding, his aptitude and his skill sets and knowing what he can bring to the equation. And of course, he happened to have the capital to do something like that. He actually got sued by one of the co-founders because he started claiming that he was a co-founder of the company. In my opinion, he is, right? But the truth is if we rewind all the way back, he's actually an acquisition entrepreneur more times than not, right?
Yeah, and that would be hard to define. I mean, when you talk about a co-founder, I mean it could be viewed in stages. I mean, we could go back to Apple. I mean, the two guys hanging out in the garage, trying to create a individual computer versus the one that actually started Apple. The company itself was a completely different stage or phase out of that garage. But let me go back to a point you just made earlier about finding funding.
Sure.
So if we've got listeners out there that would like to, that really like this concept of maybe acquiring an online business that's already up and running, that it looks like it has the potential to scale, and maybe the person running that business, doesn't have the aptitude or no longer can function in that, or for some reason just hasn't gotten it to that level. You said
Absolutely.
funding is available, but where exactly is that? I mean, you don't go down to your bank per se. I mean, are there kind of micro VCs out there? Are there micro angel investors? I mean,
Nope.
Where
It's
does the money come from?
Yeah, it's literally bankable. And that's the difference between a startup where you're trying to raise money or put money into something that has no value, and then you're trying to create the value or create that infrastructure from scratch, right?
Right.
These things are literally bankable. And there's a big change with the Small Business Administration, the SBA, January 1st of 2018. And one of the things that they're doing is they're now providing 10% down cash flow loans, meaning, the first business I bought, there had to be a certain amount of assets in the business.
Right.
The first business I bought was actually a book printing company that I bought the same week that the Amazon Kindle came out. I mean, it was like, it's a great story. Let's talk about that. The point is, it required, these big assets, and so I ended up buying a manufacturing company because it had the assets that I needed in order to get the bankable, right? But the truth is have you ever tried to sell a computer that's like 3 years old?
Yeah.
What'd you get for it?
Nothing.
Zero,
Right.
right? And
Exactly.
yet you have all of these company, computers, just as an example, sitting on the balance sheet as an asset with value. They've got no value. They have no value. These big presses were, the size of small homes, right? And made of iron. And there was special concrete under the floor to hold them up and all the rest of it. And the bank said, okay, this asset is worth, so many dollars. So we'll go ahead and give you, that'll serve as collateral for this loan. If they knew anything about the printing industry, you would actually have to disassemble the presses and sell it off as raw parts, because there was 2.5 printing presses for every printing job. I mean, it was like those things were worthless. So the SBA has kind of caught on, right? And there's a couple of trends going on here. Number one, baby boomers own more companies than any other generation ever in history, okay? And they're starting to retire at like 10,000 a day. So it's absolutely insane, okay? There's estimated to be $10 trillion in business value that needs to change hands. So the SBA says, we're going to help these people exit, and we're going to help the new generation get in. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to supply loans to these acquisition entrepreneurs with a very affordable rate, because we believe in the infrastructure of these companies, okay? Let's come back to your failure rate for a minute. 1.5% of SBA loans, okay, on businesses reach default rate.
That's incredible.
Okay? So that's what, 98.5%.
That is incredible.
Let's just say don't fail. I don't have numbers on the success, okay, but they don't fail. That's like exactly opposite of, not only am I going to make it as a startup, but then I'm going to reach significant size and scale above $1 million in revenue. Okay. So, you can go to the bank so now the SBA says, not only are we going to help empower these entrepreneurs to buy these companies and help these baby boomers exit, but we're also going to recognize that, the infrastructure as we used to measure it is no longer valid, and I can have a little cash machine, selling upflush toilets online, where a 3PL is dropping, this product out, and someone's working the 4-hour work week, generating cash flow.
Yep.
You with me?
Sure.
No assets at all. A MacBook Pro maybe.
So, how are they valuing? I mean, maybe I think that they're, bank loan officers are Luddites or something. Maybe I don't think they're in the 21st century. I mean,
Yep.
are they making that? Are banks making the transition to say, you know what, we can value these online companies versus the brick and mortar versus the? I
Yeah.
mean, are they
So
making that transition?
yeah, so the advisors will value it. So there, like any marketplace, there's a supply and a demand,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the thing is I recently wrote the book Buy Then Build: How Acquisition Entrepreneurs Outsmart the Startup Game. This is all about how you buy a business, right? And the thing is I've also started, it just sort of dovetailed into this opportunity where, earlier this summer, I started helping online entrepreneurs exit their companies. And the point is here is that whoever has the supply of businesses to sell will meet demand. Okay. So in other words, I can go help buyers, but as you read in my book, I don't really believe that buyers should be paying advisors like me. It's just a little bit backwards. Like, so in other words, helping people exit also helps the buyers. You
Sure.
with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I work both sides. So as an advisor, I help the online entrepreneurs understand the private markets,
Mm-hmm.
and I help them understand what their business will sell for. Okay. There's a lot of components that go into it.
Right.
Okay. And I'm not going to keep this just to online businesses. I'm
Mm-hmm.
also going to talk about, the hardcore old economy
Right.
infrastructure that's out there.
Right.
If you're buying a business, between, let's pick a number like, 750,000 in revenue and, 5 million in revenue, the odds of that transacting for a multiple of, 2 to 4 times the adjusted EBITDA number, like
Mm-hmm.
let's just say the tinkered with earnings. Let's
Right.
just call it that for this conversation, right? You find out what the total cash flow benefit to the owner is, and then you multiply that by a 2.5 to 4, maybe on the high end 5 year return for that buyer, because these buyers want a 30% return on their capital.
Okay. Yeah.
So said another way, you can go buy a business, okay, that's generating, let's just say $100,000
Mm-hmm.
in earnings. Let's say it's $1 million in revenue, generating $100,000 for the owner. I'm totally making these numbers up.
Sure.
We're going to go buy it for, 3x, so $300,000, and I'm going to go get an SBA loan to do it, and I'm only going to put 10% down, okay? So I'm going to put $30,000 down to buy the business.
Wow.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Now you're going to have working capital and, inventory, and maybe there's a building. But the point is if you compare that to, hey, I'm going to go take $30,000 and put it in a startup. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've personally lost $30,000 trying to start, an online company myself. And,
Right.
I mean, that's just another example. Okay. The point is sorry. I just want to say one thing. I think people are going to misunderstand something that I say, and I want to be very clear because I almost didn't write the book because of this. People are going to hear what I just said and say, oh, Walker's telling me I should go out and put 10% down on this business and go buy it. Okay. If you take 90% leverage on a business acquisition, you need to understand the risk that you're taking, right? I mean, you have to put a personal guarantee down on SBA loans. I mean, you are risking bankruptcy.
Right.
The odds are in your favor, and hopefully you fit the right profile of someone who can take that business to the next level. But there's very real risk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just as the investors of your startup get the upside to your labor, you will get the upside to your labor. I'm only saying that it is available and that you can do that. And if you're going to do it, be careful, be smart, but it's an option, and the government is offering it.
Let me ask you a question about another thing that's I think is unique kind of to the startup world online is so many of these I guess service providers that are online it's based on a personality. It's based on the individual themselves. How do you kind of make that determination when you're looking at a company to buy? That's how do you divide out the value of the company of, with that person involved and with that person removed from the company. So,
The seller or the buyer?
if you're, let's say I have a company that I've
Yep.
started online and I'm, I've kind of scaled it to a certain point, but I want to sell it. How do you determine how much of that value of that company is based on me being involved in the company versus the company itself? Because that would be, I think, especially with the products and services online, it's so personality driven,
Mm-hmm.
and so how do you make that determination?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a business that is based around your personality,
Hmm.
that yeah, you're just not it's gonna be a pretty low multiple
Right.
if you can exit at all.
Sure.
You know, rising tide is rising tide, right? It's not you, Kevin,
Right.
as
Exactly.
it's not your identity. So
There's a
it's
method to
just
that
as an
madness.
example. What's that?
There's a method to that madness.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. Anyone listening?
That's
Everything I have
right.
is for sale. Yeah, right.
Three
Yeah.
times revenue.
So the point is that sorry. So how do we evaluate the seller's role in a business? Okay. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Number one, let's start with the end in mind for a minute. I think it's the best way to answer this question. So if you've never bought a business, it feels mysterious. When I first went out, what I found was it was an opaque, fragmented industry with no, best practices whatsoever. The skill set of, and the backgrounds of the brokers and advisors was enormous.
Right.
You've got everything from, a Main Street business broker trying to sell, a rundown bar to, an investment banker and everything in between. I mean,
Sure.
it's just, it's really fragmented and tough to navigate. Once you do it and once you start figuring it out, you realize that by the time you're done with due diligence, you know that
Yeah,
business
that's true.
better than anyone else ever, except maybe the owner.
Hmm.
Okay. And the thing is that, everyone gets worried about like, well, what does the owner know that I don't know? Okay. And you should be asking yourself that question. But what I want to say is that I don't care what business you're in, there is a business problem right around the corner.
Yeah.
And you're going to have it as the CEO of whatever company you have, okay? And if the seller is tight-lipped about a certain trend or a certain something like that, I mean, that's your job is to figure that out, right? But you're going to have such a degree of confidence if you treat due diligence the right way. Let's rewind all the way to the beginning,
Hmm.
though. So the point is once you get through due diligence and truly understand the business, you will get comfortable. But you're talking about is what you're asking is maybe even before that, which is how do we decide what the owner is doing? Frankly, ask them. I'm really not buying right now. Okay, I've got three companies. I'm advising. I just wrote this book. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Hmm.
However, there was a company I was looking at last week. Obviously, it's got to be remain confidential. But one of my questions to the owner is, okay, how many hours are you working, and what exactly are you doing, right? And just by working through, what she was responsible for, I sort of figured out what would be walking out the door with that seller. And I thought to myself, okay, as much as I would like this to be an opportunity for me, it's not right now
Hmm.
because the skill set that's going to walk with her, I don't currently have at the business that I would try to,
Mm. Yeah,
grow, merge it with, right?
that's a great question.
So it was a whole different problem. Yeah.
So I want to encourage our listeners to watch this on YouTube because when he talked about, well, I'm not buying right now, but if I was, his eyes lit up. He got that little gleam in his eye that said, if I were, this would certainly be
Well,
a candidate.
Kevin,
So yeah,
yeah, and
I
I'm going to
love
tell you,
that.
like, that's the other thing is like growing through acquisition is a whole nother topic, right?
Sure.
And the thing is that, I learned this actually in the printing industry. Okay, so we were at a point where, the mature industry that we were in started to decline with electronic alternatives and such. And we can talk about, whatever in that period. But one of the things that had worked had one of the strategies for prior ownership and in the business in the industry was to try to hire salespeople with existing books of business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sort
Right.
of hire them, steal them away, and then bring your accounts over.
Yeah.
Okay. I learned pretty quickly that this does not work at all. It doesn't work at all. And so I started looking for data to support, my hunch. And what I found was it was like 98% of customers stick with the business, not the salesperson,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And then, you look into like sales training and you get all these other stats, like 70 to 80% of customers believe that their salesperson really doesn't even know what's going on in their business, right? So they help bring them to the table, but they're actually not as important as they typically think that they are, like based on statistics
Right.
and numbers. Okay.
Sure.
Now, if you buy the business and all the salespeople leave, you're actually better off. Okay. If you really think about it, right?
Yep.
But if you can buy that business and retain the salespeople in this type of equation, you're retaining all of that value,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so being able to buy it on a 2 to 4 year return, that with some debt and with a 30% return on your investment all the way through. I mean, it's really hard to argue about it.
Yeah.
So if my eyes lit up, it's because I'm always looking for the growth opportunity. Mm-hmm.
Well, I also, as you look at companies that have gone through some, acquisition, that, a lot of times the staff is not retained in the acquisition, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, when you outline this, because it's a mathematical equation. What are the statistics? Let's look at the analytics and the metrics that say, if 100% of this staff is gone, and we replace it with, a cheaper, younger, staff, and we can retain 75%, we're better off with the new staff than we were with the old staff. I mean, it just makes perfect business sense when you look at those types of decisions.
So I just want to talk to that for just a minute, because I don't do that personally. Every single business I've ever bought, I've retained 100% of the employees, and every single time I've sold a business, retaining 100% of my employees has always been a requirement, and one thing that I will not exit without. So just to be perfectly clear. The other thing is, as an advisor, I tend to work with companies between $1 million and $25 million in revenue. And at that level, in the online world,
right,
there's not a lot of employees.
That's true. Yeah.
And so if I started to go bigger, the core problem I have with it is that people start to lose their jobs. And I don't like that. I don't want to help people lose their jobs. I want to help entrepreneurs exit. You know what I mean?
Well, I didn't mean to go all channel my inner Gordon Gekko there.
No, but it's an important perception, right? And yeah, I mean, if you merge two companies together and there's two accountants or whatever, you only need one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not only from the standpoint of just touching on that, but I mean, I just appreciate the character behind that. That because obviously that's a personal ethos, that you've developed over time. You say this is important to me. This is character. This is what is determining. This what makes me a trusted partner. And in making these.
And I will say, it's one of these things where, the first business I sold, it was to an acquisition target. I was trying to grow, and I wanted what they had, and they sort of started to realize that we fit together so well. And then they said, I want to do it, but I want to buy your company. And I was like, okay, first question, I need you to retain all the people. No problem. Okay, fine. Because the private markets have appropriate valuations for companies. Sure. I mean, the valuation is the valuation, and there's a little bit of range, but in other words, if you are a budding acquisition entrepreneur and you want to go out and buy a business, one of the things that I always listen for is what's important to the seller. Mm-hmm. Because if you can identify the qualitative things, and if you can be, when you go in and you're basically interviewing to be the CEO for their company, which is their baby, right? Yep. So you've got to kind of nail that interview, so to speak, and then you've got to really listen to what it is that is important to them. And I think a lot of times those qualitative things are the things that win out.
It may be retaining the name of the company. I mean, it may be something that exactly. I mean, just the owner wants a legacy.
That's right.
I want a bench out front with my name on it. That type of thing.
That's right.
Just listening to those little nuances during the interview. So, You mentioned a couple of times a book, so you want to touch
Yeah,
on that? You got a book coming out
sure.
that is launched. I mean, this month, right?
Yeah, it came out what 2, 3 weeks ago. It's
Hmm.
called Buy Then Build. So what's cool is being a former book manufacturer, I happen to know that 90% of books never exceed 1,000 copies sold. I was lucky enough to sell 1,000 copies in 6 days, which was
Wow.
just so thrilling. And I got to tell you, Kevin, I wrote this book almost entirely in the middle of the night. Okay, I wrote it between like 2:30 in the morning and 7 in the morning over the course of about 3.5 years. And my wife was, supportive enough to let me. We've got 3 small children. She let me write it on Saturday mornings as well. So this book, it was like a labor of love. But more importantly, I'm talking like the middle of winter, the middle of the night, dark out, just like thinking through my ideas and trying to get them down on paper and trying to get the data and experiences of other people to sort of
Sure.
support.
Yeah.
And so when the book came out, I was like, am I crazy? Like, no one's written this book. Like, it's sort of like if you believe in efficient markets, like someone would have written this book. You know what I mean? And so I can't explain to you. One of your pre-interview questions
Hmm.
is, what's the top of the mountain?
Yeah.
The response has just been so flattering. I never could have imagined. And I feel like people are kind of coming out of the woodwork. And there's something to build here that's pretty cool.
Is it unique? I mean, I look back at your history and the
Yeah.
releasing films versus releasing a book. What's
Mm.
unique about releasing a book compared to producing a film or even acting?
Yeah, well, I mean, I even told you it's basically a film is like it's a team sport. It's a team sport. I mean, I mean, I can't be humble enough, right? I
Hmm.
mean, if I say, in comparison, I do nothing. I mean, I think that a lot of people on the team would say that. At the same time, there are some people that, the main producer and the director especially. I mean, it's just they bleed and sweat these films,
Yeah.
right? I'm much more on the business side.
Right.
I don't mean to be. That's just where my skill set is. If you put me in a room of, private equity people, I'm like artsy. If you put me in a room of, filmmakers, I'm too businessy. I'm sort of like I'm somewhere in the middle, I guess. Put me in the room of entrepreneurs and I'm the acquisition guy, right? I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
so, it's one of these, where this book, I'm telling you, man, like no one read it before it came out, and I was terrified. It was really really a strange thing, and yeah,
But it was
yeah,
built based on life experience. It was based on. I mean, you were obviously a practitioner.
yeah,
You're not just picking things. You're not. You're not. It's not just academia. You're not just picking things out of the
that's
ether
right.
and
No,
putting
no,
them
I mean,
down in your own
yeah.
words.
Let me give you a little bit of my story. So basically, I was an English lit and religious studies major, okay, that then got a job as a stockbroker right out of college, okay, and right, yeah, good
And your
mix, but
dad kept going. I'm
yeah,
sorry. What are you going to do
yeah.
with this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We could go that way. The point is, I ended up coming back and getting my MBA at WashU in
Right.
St. Louis. And during that time, I was like, I am starting a business. I am using this protection of school, right, to sort of be like, I'm going to take this 2 years and start a business, which we did. Me and 3 other guys started this company. We had this licensed technology out of California. We licensed it for point of purchase advertising, and it was amazing. And we were talking to Walmart, and they were on the hook, and they wanted to roll it out. And we were working through operations. There was hardware, there's a hardware, there's a software. It was big, and we were raising capital, and we were in the business plan competition. And then the month that I graduated, the whole thing got, let's just say, hung up in legal, and the whole business fell apart
Hmm.
before we were able to sell the product and before we were able to close on the capital raise.
Wow.
And so here I am graduating, probably the only person in the class without a job, right? And that's when it hit me. I was like, okay, these MBA programs are truly built to feed the demand of middle market, middle management at
Right.
large
Exactly. Yeah.
organizations. Okay,
Yeah.
and here I am, like, gosh, maybe I should have thought about that better, but I really don't want to do that. Like I can be a good general, I can operate like that. Here we go, and I did it for a little bit, but I was I was like, I'm an entrepreneur, but I don't have an idea. Like my idea was back there, it just crashed, and now I'm unemployed, right? So what do I do? And so I was like, I know you can buy a business. How do you do this? And I sort of failed at it, okay, for the reasons we talked about. And so I went corporate, and then I ended up buying this book printing company, okay? And then I sold it to an acquisition target, and then I did a startup, and similar to what we talked about, we recruited a guy from Microsoft to be our CEO. We oversubscribed the capital raise. We went through one of the top 10 accelerator programs in the world. We had betas at all these different, large organizations. And 8 months later, we were completely out of cash, right? I mean, this was like not going to fail, and it totally failed. Okay. And so then one of the brokers that I worked with to try to acquire and ultimately sell a business that I had called and said, "Hey, Walker, how's that startup going?" And I was like, "Gary, it's a little rocky." And he said, "Good, because I got a business. It's a perfect fit. You've got to come see it." Right. And so I ended up buying this company. And then I bought another company to grow with it. And then I looked at my management team, and I ended up buying this other company. And then I bought this e-commerce company. And then I started a business that failed. And then and then people started coming to me and saying, "How are you doing what you're doing? Like what is this? Or like, how do I do that?" And so I started to realize, okay, there is kind of a best practice or an operating procedure that I'm doing here. Let me just force myself to write it down, right? And then I looked at, how do I support this in economics? How do I support this as an investment vehicle? How do I support this as an entrepreneurship path, just based on empirical evidence? Because all I have is my own experience and some people immediately around me, right? So it was gaining traction, but I was just trying to figure out what's the model that I'm using. That's by the build. Yeah.
I mean, you talk about it's kind of a narrow focus. It was my own experience, but your experience is broad. I mean, just how many different industries have you been in? How many companies have you looked at that you haven't purchased, but yet
hundreds.
Have certainly built that kind of internal library that you're developing. So.
Well, and let me share with you. So I'm an advisor with Quitelight Brokerage. Okay, and Quitelight, what Quitelight does is they hire only entrepreneurs first, right? So there's no junior employees, running spreadsheets in the back or anything like that, right? So it's all of us, right? And we're all entrepreneurs first, and then we sort of get into deal making later. And why did I bring this up? Because I became a raving fan of Quitelight 10 years ago, okay? And I'm telling you, regardless of the industry, the niche, anything, I loved their properties. I loved their business summaries. I mean, it's just, they're so thorough. They think like buyers, and everything was so good. And I did buy a business through the founder there a few years back. And I ended up coming on board. And the point is now I'm in a position where I'm talking to these entrepreneurs, and I'm looking at their properties, and I'm learning about them, and I'm putting together these like 24-page business summaries in depth. And I'm like,
sure,
Walker, don't get hooked on your own stash. I mean, this is like,
I love that analogy.
Deal flow, and it's like, oh, I just want to buy all of these companies. They're so good. And so yeah.
You just dated yourself. You're gonna go back to a Cheech and Chong movie reference or something like that.
Right.
So the Quitelight Brokerage, that's a business brokerage versus, I mean, is that all they do is buy and sell businesses?
No, we actually we help sell profitable online companies, right? Okay. And let's be clear, this is not my company. Mark Dowse founded the company 11 years ago or something like that, and but he's done it great. He's like, he just says, look, I hire entrepreneurs. You guys know what you're doing. Here's our standard operating procedures. Here's our values. Here's how we operate. And he's like, I'm no good at managing people. I never can. You guys manage yourselves. It's great. So there's no employees. We're all independent contractors, and it's just what does he call it? He calls it an alumni group for successful entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
And it's perfect. So I'm not an alumni though. I still have 3 companies going, and yeah. So I try to take fewer listings than I think I could,
Well,
but
I would I could literally talk to you all day long about these things, and I know
sure.
that I've taken quite a bit of your time tonight, and I'd appreciate the time you dedicated to this. But so, can you wrap up a little bit for us? Just
Okay.
if we have listeners online that are kind of looking at the idea of, I want to acquire something versus starting something from scratch.
Uh-huh.
What are two or three just basic steps, and not the $1 million valuation or $5 million valuation, but something
Sure.
that just a solo person out there that just says, "Hey, I really want to acquire something."
Yep.
What are some things that they really need to look at and consider if there's a
Yep.
3 to 5 step process type thing?
Yep. So let's start with this. 90% of people that start looking for a business to acquire never close on a deal. Okay.
Wow.
I was talking with these 2 ladies who were looking for a business to buy. They sort of had the golden handcuffs on. They were, middle management at a large
Hmm.
organization with great packages, and they were asking me these questions, and I was kind of taking them through sort of my funnel that's right in my book. The book hadn't come out, and I was going through the funnel and I'm asking them these questions, and we got to this point, and they sort of looked at each other, and they were like, "We should have bought that company that we just, that we passed on that somebody else bought." And the thing is they didn't know what they were looking for,
Mm,
right? And I think that so many people start the process, Kevin, saying, I don't know, we'll just kind of see what's out there,
sure.
or whatever, almost like dating at a young age or something. It's like, I don't know, whatever,
I'm in
So,
eighth grade. I'm not getting married for a
yeah,
while. That's
right.
right.
And then they walk in almost as if the seller is supposed to like pitch them on like why they should buy their business. That's completely the wrong way to go about it.
Mm,
Okay. What you want to do is you want to identify what your aptitude is and what your skill set is. And you want to think about how you want to be spending your time. And you want to take those things and apply them to a growth opportunity. Forget the industry, forget the size, forget all of the rest of it. Only think about what is the growth opportunity that I can push. Is it, bringing you know, online, online advantages to an old economy of business? Is it, I know how to manage a sales force, so I'm looking for a company with tight operations who's falling on sales? Whatever it is, identify the growth opportunity and everything else will fall into place. Okay. Number 2, get upstream. Okay. There's a lot of websites out there, and I don't know how to say it. It's sort of like monster.com or career builder or something like this. Somehow there's all the jobs in the world are on these websites. Every time I've been unemployed, which has been a lot, I've never gotten a job from one of
sure.
these websites. And moreover, I don't know one person who's ever
Exactly.
got a job from the. So the point is the online marketplaces
Hmm.
sort of settle down to, the kind of the bottom of the market.
Hmm.
Okay, get upstream. Look for the brokers in your geographic area. Look for the M&A advisors in your area. Think about your growth opportunity. Think about the limiters, the things you won't do, and go in and have these conversations with them. That's going to be the thing that separates the wheat from the chaff. The third is probably just start networking with bankers. Frankly, look for the ones that can make SBA loans internally, or go out and start talking to search funds. Search funds are, largely alumni groups that will, circle around a specific entrepreneur and essentially fund an acquisition for that entrepreneur, giving them, I'll pick a number, 25% equity in the business that they'll
Sure.
be running,
Right.
kind of like a startup,
Right.
right? Just like a startup model,
But
like a
I would
VC
think they
model.
would be more apt to jump on something that is a proven concept than something that's completely
Absolutely.
unknown for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that is a great way to wrap up our
Yeah.
chat tonight. I am so grateful for you taking the time to just kind of unpack, and it's been a great ride for the last
Yeah.
40 minutes or so, and I just love. I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface,
We
on
haven't.
you. So we're gonna have to schedule a follow up sometime in
Kevin,
2019. So
yeah, but before we go off, can I just share? I've got this one
absolutely.
idea that's kind of, I feel like right now we're kind of in this confluence, right? So Taylor Pearson wrote this book, The End of Jobs. And if you're familiar with this book, what he did was he went through and basically just looked at the data in terms of here's how many people are entering the workforce
Hmm.
and here's how many jobs, new jobs are available. Okay. And he sort of looks at, the theory of constraints in the economy. And he concludes, I believe rightly so, that entrepreneurship is the next economy. Okay. And the skill sets that make entrepreneurs are the skill sets that are going to separate the wheat from the chaff in the next cycle of the economy. Okay. Simultaneously, we have not engineered a better way to start until the buy then build model. Okay. Because you're statistically going to succeed, almost the antithesis
Right.
of the failure rate of a startup.
Right.
So looking at the buy then build model, right at a time where entrepreneurship skill sets are going to be driving the economy, form a really nice marriage together. Then you throw on top of it the fact that $10 trillion in business assets from retiring baby boomers is coming online. It's a tremendous opportunity and perhaps the opportunity of our lifetime.
It's the perfect storm.
It
really
but like
is
whatever the opposite is. But yes. What is the opposite of the perfect storm? I don't know.
It's a Kairos moment. It's one of those times where it's just all the planets align type thing. So.
Right. It's one of these things where, again, one of your pre-interview questions is, think of a quote, right? Or should I ask you to ask me this? Should I wait for you to ask me this question?
No,
Is there a quote that, is, and I mean, throughout my life, there is one that has stuck with me longer than this one, but this one struck me about a year ago and has really struck with me. It's the first quote in the book. It comes from Victor Hugo, and it's something along the lines of, no army can withstand the strength of an idea whose time has come. And I just feel like we're on the precipice of this enormous opportunity. And it's very exciting to be an entrepreneur today.
Well, you've sold me. I mean, not that I was the anti-acquisition when we started,
right.
But the whole idea behind Rising Tide Startups. I mean, I do think, like I said at the very beginning, I think we tend to think from starting from zero as a startup. But if you can mitigate the risk, if you can jump on a proven concept through acquisition, to me that's the path of least resistance. And really, like you said, it's the inverse of this this high failure rate of startups. If you can find something that's already rolling and you're really just scaling it, you're stepping into it with your skill set and your passions, that are a good fit with this opportunity. So, and I really appreciate you kind of really drilling down and unpacking that for us. And I'm serious. I would love to have you on again early 2019 and
let's do it.
Just unleash you again, and maybe we could have a part 2, or we'll do a webinar on acquisitions or something. We can do something here. So, Walker, thank you so much for your time tonight, and I just really appreciate you speaking into our listeners and just really playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Kevin.